Hello and welcome to Book Review with a Buzz. Except today there isn't a buzz because this is serious shit. What I'm going to do actually is probably change the name of it to Views from the Shed, but I'll tell you more about that later. What I'm going to do today is review 4 books which I'm quite familiar with because I wrote them. However, I'm going to review them in the third person. So let's see how it goes. The first book is called In Search of Greener Grass. And it's about this bloke who he'd always ridden motorbikes and he'd always travelled. And he'd also always kept a diary. What happens in this book? It starts with a TV game show. And on this TV game show, they ask him what he'd do if he'd win a significant amount of money. And he says, I'm going to do a trip to Mongolia. And they said that on the show. So he felt somewhat compelled to do it. So he bought a £750 second-hand KLR 650 off of eBay and kitted it out all on a really tight budget. So with a bike that stood him with all the panniers and everything in the panniers, it stood him at about £2,000, and he headed east without much of a clue. And slowly made it through Poland to the Ukraine, into Russia and Kazakhstan, and eventually he made it into Mongolia. The diary format tends to keep people part of the trip because they don't know any more than he does if he's going to make it. Although there's one huge gaping hole in his plan, because when he gets to Mongolia, which was an unthinkable distance, he never imagined on such a tight budget, on such an old bike, and such a huge distance that he would get there, he realised he hadn't really considered what he'd do after that. Mongolia being a landlocked country, the biggest landmass on the planet, it's not famous for its ports. You've got to go somewhere from there. So he decides he better keep heading east. Maybe to Vladivostok, where perhaps he can ship his bike home, because you have to leave Russia with the vehicle that you entered with. It's stamped into your passport. So this is what happens, and the adventure continues, in fact, because that doesn't work, and he has to keep going east. But I won't tell you how it ends, because I want to ruin it for you. The thing about this book is, it was a trip in 2010. The book came out in 2011 or maybe early 2012, and now 8 years later, as I make this video at the end of 2020, it continues to sell. It really resonates with people, perhaps because it's a diary format, perhaps because it's a very low budget. In the days of Ewan and Charlie and very high-end, high-budget, big support trips, it proved that it was possible to be able to do long trips, journeys that you dreamed about, on a very small amount of money. Perhaps that's why it resonates, I don't know. But it continues to sell. It continues to be the author's best-selling book. It's also available as an audio book, although there's hardly any of those left. But you can get it on Audible and, of course, as an ebook. So that is the part 1 of 4-part book review without a buzz. Okay, book number 2 is called Eureka. And the reason for that is the journey is about a U-turn. What happened was, having the success of the first journey and the first book, he decided to do a second trip. Same old knackered KLR 650, same budget of about £5,000 and same time frame of about 100 days. But this time he was going to go south into Iraq and then up into the stands and do a kind of a circuit, as opposed to a one-way journey. The journey didn't go terribly well. Through Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, into Turkey, it was all right, but there was something lacking. Wasn't really getting the mojo. Went south into Iraq, which again was a spectacular experience, but still it wasn't quite happening. Through Eastern Turkey and up into Georgia, which was a spectacular country and very diverse country, but was somewhat rushed to get through to Azerbaijan, where the visas started, because you know so many different visas to go through the stands. And there in Baku, in eastern Azerbaijan, on the edge of the Caspian Sea, booked onto a ferry to meet a tour guide on the other side, to go through Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and into the mountainous region that he craved, he just thought, this ain't working. I don't know what this feeling is. Is this the feeling that people who didn't get on the Titanic had? Is this just a feeling of trepidation? I'm not doing it. I'm doing it for all the wrong reasons. This was going to be... Oh, I said I, didn't I? He he was doing it for all the wrong reasons. It was going to be a second book. That's not the reason to go on a trip to write a book. And so in the end, he decided to turn around. Bollocks to it. I'm going to pull the plug. I'm not going to do it. Who am I doing it for? I'm doing this trip. He's doing this trip for him. And so he can do whatever he wants. He's not obligated to sponsors. He's not obligated to Facebook followers or blog followers or even the people who read his first book. So he pulled the plug, he turned around. And the second he made that decision, it's as if the planets aligned and everything fell into place. He spent a lot more time in Georgia on his return, discovered what a beautiful country it was, hiking and glaciers, and started meeting people. That's what was lacking. One of the things that was lacking was you just couldn't. Company, particularly when you travel solo, doesn't always come when you want it to. But it finally arrived in Georgia, and it was great. And then back through Turkey again, a rather prolonged trip. And again, meeting people, Turkish families, the hospitality of Islam and Muslim people. And didn't rush back home, didn't have a home to go to. The home was rented out. And again, spent more time in Bulgaria and slowly through former Yugoslavian countries and meandered back to the UK. So at the end, it was a 100-day trip, and it was a £5,000 budget, and it was again 15,000 miles, albeit in a circle. And so he decided, you know what, I am going to write a book about it. And it actually turned out to be quite well received, because people said, oh God, I felt that too. I also lost my mojo. I also got fed up with it. I did a U-turn. It's okay to say that. It's okay to do that. And so inadvertently, the book became quite well liked because it was a failed journey insofar as the destination was not reached. But then again, what is failure? Is failure pressing on to do something that you're really not enjoying, or completely changing the plan so that you do enjoy it? So Eureka, the second book, spelt initially with a U, as in a U-turn, and Eureka, have that Eureka moment where you find the truth, you decide what it is you need, but later spelt with an E, because everybody who did a Google search for Eureka generally spelt it correctly and couldn't find the book, which has now confused the hell out of everything because there's 2 ISBN numbers and it's a complete mess. Anyway, Eureka, spell it how you please. It's the second book in the, what's 4 books, not trilogy, quillogy. And that's the story so far. Right, it's finally warming up in here a bit more now. And that brings us to the third book, Different Natures. This, the author was a bit worried that it might be a bit of a risk, because these are 3 different stories in one book. Not necessarily done in the time that they're written about, because he delved back into his diaries. The first trip is from 2001, and it was a journey on a god-awful Yamaha venture. It was a 10-state trip. They all the trips in this book started and ended in Colorado. And it was a 10-state trip that went west to California, north into Seattle, Washington, and then slowly back. He knew nothing about long-distance bike trips and quite a lot about drinking and drug taking. In fact, looking back at this diary, it's quite remarkable that the author's still here at all. But it's an interesting insight into where he came from. The second trip in this book was in 2007. This again started in Colorado and was with 2 other friends, and they rode north to Alaska, to the Arctic Circle. It's a bit laddish, there's a lot of drinking, and but it's also insightful as to the author discovers what he does and doesn't like about motorcycle travel and travelling with company. It's a good trip. It's again, the trip finishes solo the last 3 weeks of it perhaps. It's about 11,000 mile, 6 or 7 week trip. And that's when the author begins to learn what he wants to do in the future. And the third trip was in 2012. Having already done the trip which became the book In Search of Greener Grass to Mongolia and beyond, he then did a journey again from Colorado, and this time south into Mexico solo. A lot more reflective about the different, not just the different natures of that he travelled through, but within himself. And also this was the precursor to the Eureka trip, and you will probably read some clues as to perhaps why the Eureka trip to Iraq and then which turned around in the Caspian Sea went so wrong. So 3 books, 3 stories in one book, and the reason it's called Different Natures is because it's the different natures of growing older and becoming more experienced, as well as the different natures that he rode through, from high plains, Alaskan tundra, Mexican desert, and you know, Pacific coast escapism, and all those things in between. This is the least popular of the 4 books. However, everybody who has read it say they like it the most. It's like the best kept secret. I mean, one of the book has to be least selling, and this is the one. But it did give birth to the spectacular T-shirt, which is also, you know, quite popular. So, Different Natures, the 3rd book in the 4-book review. And that brings us to the 4th book, Nirvana. You may notice a similarity between the cover and the background. Look, the smoke's even blowing the same direction out of the chimney. His readers had to wait 5 years for this book to come out after the release of the last one, Different Natures. And the reason for that is partly described within the book, because unlike the other 3 books, this isn't all about motorcycle travel, although it is in a diary format like the others are. This diary was about the relocation to Bulgaria. In 2015, the author gave up his house in Essex and decided to move to the European Union's most easterly member, the former communist country of Bulgaria. And it still has travel in it, because there was a lot of back and forth in the relocation, bringing various motorcycles down here. But it was also about learning to live in a country that was completely foreign to him. He didn't understand the language, couldn't read the Cyrillic alphabet, and it was about learning, firstly, the different traits of a very different race and different country, but secondly, learning about what's involved in relocating, and just all the different spectacular aspects of wide open spaces in this country, the climate and the empty roads and birds just shat and other things that happen that you weren't expecting. So this book came out in the summer of 2020, and it felt a little bit risky to bring it out to a mainly motorcycle orientated fan base, but they seem to like it. So the author was quite pleased about that. This is only part 1. There will be possibly many more parts we'll have to see, because it is a diary. So Nirvana, the 4th book in the quillogy. And the other news that I touched upon at the beginning was this view from the shed, which this actually isn't. However, Adventure Bike TV have just commissioned me to do a spot sponsored by the Adventure Bike Shop to review products that the Adventure Bike Shop are going to send me to review, and also the columns that I used to write for Adventure Bike TV are now going to be done in a spoken word sort of vlog format. Vlog, is that what it's called? So that will be done on a new camera instead of my phone, and not on a balcony where I'm a little bit self-conscious that I'm talking a bit loud and all you can hear is cock crows and dogs barking. So views from a shed will be out in 2021 with hopefully better quality, because I'm not going to be doing the editing, and better content because I'm going to be told what to say. I will see you then.